In the summer of 1945, on a volcanic island 750 miles south of Tokyo, American Marine Herschel Williams crawled toward a concrete pillbox, spitting machine gun fire. On his back, he carried 72 pounds of liquefied death. In the next 4 hours, this farm boy from West Virginia would single-handedly destroy 7 Japanese positions, killing dozens of enemy soldiers with a weapon so horrific that even battle-hardened Marines could barely watch. His flamethrower would burn at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt steel, to suffocate men in their bunkers, to turn the volcanic sand into glass. By the end of World War II, American flamethrowers would account for an estimated 30,000 Japanese casualties, not through bullets or bombs, but through one of humanity's most primal fears: fire. This is the story of how a desperate weapon designed for the trenches of World War I became the Pacific War's most terrifying killer, and how the men who wielded these dragons of war paid a price that went far beyond the battlefield. The flamethrower wasn't born from American ingenuity. It was born from desperation. In 1940, as America watched Europe burn, military planners faced a terrifying reality. Japan had spent decades turning Pacific islands into fortresses. Concrete bunkers, interconnected cave systems, and camouflaged pillboxes dotted every strategic island from the Solomons to the Japanese homeland. Traditional weapons bounced off reinforced concrete. Artillery shells exploded harmlessly against volcanic rock. The Japanese had learned from World War I that the best defense wasn't armor, it was depth. They dug in, and they dug deep. The American military needed something that could reach into those depths, something that could turn a defensive position into a death trap. They found their answer in an almost forgotten weapon from the previous war: the flamethrower. The M1 flamethrower, America's first serious attempt at portable liquid fire, was crude but effective. It consisted of 3 fuel tanks containing a mixture of gasoline and diesel fuel, thickened with rubber to make it stick and burn longer. Compressed nitrogen propelled this napalm predecessor up to 45 feet. But it was the M2-2 flamethrower, introduced in 1943, that would become the nightmare of Japanese forces across the Pacific. Weighing 68 pounds fully loaded, with an improved ignition system and a range of up to 65 feet, the M2-2 could maintain a stream of fire for 8 to 9 seconds of continuous use. In those seconds, everything changed. The flame itself reached temperatures between 1,800 and 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cause third-degree burns through clothing at 100 feet, hot enough to consume all oxygen in an enclosed space within seconds, hot enough to turn a human body into carbon in under a minute. The flamethrower's true test came in the fetid jungles of Guadalcanal in January 1943. Japanese forces had constructed an elaborate defensive position called the Gifu, a horseshoe-shaped stronghold of 45 interconnected pillboxes protecting the vital airfield. For weeks, Marine riflemen and artillery had hammered at these positions to no effect. The pillboxes, made from coconut logs and earth, absorbed explosions like sponges. Machine gun fire from narrow slits cut down anyone who approached. Marine casualties mounted with nothing to show for it. Then, on January 15th, Sergeant Charles Smart crawled forward with one of the first M1 flamethrowers to see combat in the Pacific. What happened next would change the nature of Pacific warfare forever. Smart approached a pillbox that had killed 6 Marines that morning. From 30 feet away, he triggered his flamethrower. The liquid fire arced through the air, splashing against the pillbox opening. But it wasn't the fire that killed first. It was the gas. The burning fuel consumed oxygen so rapidly, the Japanese soldiers inside suffocated before the flames ever touched them. Those who ran from the rear exits were cut down by Marine riflemen. In 5 minutes, Smart had accomplished what a rifle company couldn't do in 5 days. Word spread quickly through Marine units. By the battle's end, flamethrowers had reduced 65 Japanese positions, killing an estimated 400 defenders. The psychological impact was even greater. Japanese soldiers who had fought to the death against rifles and grenades fled in panic from the flamethrower. For the first time, Marines had a weapon that the Japanese truly feared. What made the flamethrower so devastatingly effective wasn't just the fire. It was the science behind it. The fuel mixture evolved throughout the war, becoming deadlier with each iteration. The early M1 used simple gasoline, which burned quickly but didn't adhere to surfaces. By 1943, Chemical warfare units had developed a thickened mixture using rubber latex and later aluminum naphthenate, creating what would eventually be known as napalm. This jellied gasoline stuck to everything it touched: clothing, skin, concrete, even wet surfaces. It burned underwater, it burned in the rain. It couldn't be scraped off or smothered. The psychological warfare aspect was calculated and deliberate. The fuel was mixed with different chemicals to produce different effects: white phosphorus for smoke and marking, rubber for adhesion, and diesel for longer burn time. The delivery system was equally sophisticated. The M2-2's wand included a hydrogen ignition system that created a pilot flame, ensuring instant ignition even in wet conditions. The nitrogen pressure system could be adjusted for range or volume: a gentle squeeze for probing fire, full pressure for maximum destruction. Operators learned to bounce fire off ceilings, to reach around corners, to angle shots to fill entire bunker complexes with flame. They discovered that short bursts were more effective than continuous streams, allowing fire to spread and seek oxygen. Each operator became an artist of destruction, painting death across the battlefield in arcs of liquid fire. If Guadalcanal was the flamethrower's baptism, Saipan was its coming of age. In June 1944, American forces faced 30,000 Japanese defenders in the most elaborate defensive network yet encountered. The island's volcanic terrain was honeycombed with thousands of caves, many improved with concrete and steel. Traditional tactics would have meant months of bloody cave-by-cave fighting. Instead, the Marines brought 24 flamethrower teams and a new tactic: flame assault teams. Each team consisted of a flamethrower operator, 4 riflemen for protection, and 2 demolition men with satchel charges. The flamethrower would suppress the cave entrance, allowing demolition men to place charges that would seal it forever. The battle for Saipan's caves became a assembly line of death. Marine Corporal William Tatum described the process. We'd approach a cave, and I'd give it a burst of flame. You'd hear screaming from inside. Sometimes they'd come running out on fire, sometimes they'd shoot from deeper in. Either way, I'd pump in more flame until it got quiet. Then the demo boys would pack in their charges and blow the entrance. We cleared 17 caves my first day. I stopped counting after that. The numbers were staggering. In 3 weeks of fighting, flamethrower operators on Saipan killed an estimated 4,000 Japanese soldiers, many of whom would have required costly infantry assaults to dislodge. But the efficiency came at a price. Flamethrower operators had a life expectancy of 4 minutes in combat. Japanese soldiers, recognizing the threat, targeted them specifically. The distinctive silhouette of the tanks made operators prime targets for snipers. Of the 24 flamethrower operators who landed on Saipan, only 7 were still fighting at battle's end. As the island-hopping campaign progressed, the flamethrower evolved from an infantry weapon to a mechanized system of mass destruction. The M2-2 portable flamethrower was joined by flame tanks, Shermans modified with flamethrowers replacing their main guns. These Zippo tanks could project flame up to 150 feet and carry 300 gallons of fuel. On Iwo Jima, 8 flame tanks burned out over 300 Japanese positions in a single day. The Navy developed the M1 flamethrower for landing craft, turning Higgins boats into floating dragons that could clear beach defenses before troops even landed. But the most devastating development was the Mark I flamethrower, known as the Q unit, mounted on armored amphibious tractors. These vehicles could approach Japanese positions under cover of armor and deliver sustained flame attacks for up to 2 minutes continuously. The tactical employment became increasingly sophisticated. Flamethrower teams developed the corkscrew and blowtorch method. One operator would suppress a position with flame, while another circled to attack from the flank. They learned that caves had air circulation patterns, and flame directed at lower entrances would create convection currents that sucked fire through entire tunnel systems. On Peleliu, Marines discovered they could pour unignited fuel into cave entrances, let it flow through the complex, then ignite it with tracer rounds, creating underground firestorms that killed everyone inside. The Japanese tried countermeasures, double entrances, zigzag tunnels, water traps, but nothing could stop the chemistry of combustion. Fire needs oxygen, and humans need oxygen. In that simple equation lay the flamethrower's terrible effectiveness. Iwo Jima represented the flamethrower's greatest test and its most horrific triumph. The 8-square-mile island contained over 16 miles of tunnels and 1,500 fortified positions. General Kuribayashi had spent months turning the island into a subterranean fortress, designed specifically to counter American tactics. Every cave, every bunker, every fighting position was mutually supporting. Japanese orders were explicit. No suicide charges, no wasteful banzai attacks. Defend in place, make the Americans pay for every yard. Against this fortress, the Marines brought 132 portable flamethrowers and 28 flame tanks. What followed was 36 days of the most concentrated use of fire weapons in military history. The battle developed a hellish rhythm. Marine infantry would advance until stopped by Japanese fire. Flamethrower teams would crawl forward, often under direct fire, to suppress the position. Private Charles McGrew, a flamethrower operator with the 5th Marine Division, kept a diary of his experience. February 23rd, burned out 3 positions on Hill 362. The smell is something you never forget. Like overcooked meat mixed with gasoline. February 24th, Johnson bought it today. Sniper got him just as he triggered his flame. The tanks blew and covered Thompson in burning fuel. We couldn't get close enough to help. February 25th, I've stopped trying to count how many I've killed. The screaming from the caves keeps me awake anyway. By battle's end, flamethrowers had cleared over 800 Japanese positions on Iwo Jima, accounting for an estimated 7,000 enemy casualties, nearly a third of the Japanese garrison. The flamethrower's effectiveness went beyond its physical destruction. It was a weapon of pure terror. Japanese soldiers who had faced artillery barrages without flinching broke and ran at the sight of approaching flame teams. Captured Japanese documents revealed the depth of this fear. One officer's diary found on Okinawa read, "The flame weapon is the most terrible thing. We can fight against bullets and shells, but fire turns warriors into frightened animals. I have seen veteran soldiers weep like children when the flame teams approach. There is no honor in burning to death, no glory in suffocation. It unmans us." The psychological impact worked both ways. American flamethrower operators suffered from higher rates of combat fatigue than any other specialty. They couldn't escape what they did. The smell of burning flesh clung to their equipment, infiltrated their clothes, haunted their dreams. Marine psychiatrist Lieutenant Commander William Brown documented the psychological toll. Flamethrower operators exhibit unique trauma patterns. Unlike riflemen who kill at distance, these men see their victims' faces, hear their screams, smell their burning flesh. Many report intrusive thoughts of themselves burning, nightmares of being trapped in caves while flame pours in. The guilt is overwhelming. They know their victims died in agony. One operator told me, "I became death itself, and I can't wash it off." The military tried to address this by rotating operators frequently, but the damage was often already done. Many operators refused to carry flamethrowers after their first combat experience, preferring court-martial to continuing their role as burn specialists. Okinawa represented the flamethrower's final and most devastating employment in World War II. The island's 100,000 Japanese defenders had turned the southern portion into a maze of fortified positions even more elaborate than Iwo Jima. The Shuri line alone contained over 60 miles of interconnected tunnels and thousands of fortified caves. Against this, the American forces deployed over 300 portable flamethrowers, 54 flame tanks, and introduced a new horror: the long-range flamethrower that could project napalm over 300 feet. The battle for Okinawa's caves became mechanized slaughter. Flame tanks would approach fortified positions and pump hundreds of gallons of burning fuel into cave systems. The results were apocalyptic. Entire mountain faces would erupt in flame as fuel found every opening, every ventilation shaft. Technical Sergeant Farrant Turner described the systematic destruction. "We developed it into a science. First, white phosphorus rounds to mark the target and drive them deep. Then the flame tanks would move up and hose the entire hillside. The fuel would find its way into cracks you couldn't even see. We'd pump in maybe 500 gallons, then sit back and watch the mountain burn from the inside out. Sometimes you'd see flames shooting out of holes 100 yards from where we pumped it in. The whole mountain would rumble from secondary explosions, ammunition, fuel stores, everything cooking off. When it finally died down, nothing was left alive inside." The 3-month battle for Okinawa saw flamethrowers account for an estimated 11,000 Japanese casualties, many of them burned alive in positions they couldn't evacuate. As the war progressed, the escalating use of flamethrowers sparked debate even within the American military. Colonel Robert Allen, observing operations on Okinawa, wrote in his official report, "While undeniably effective, The widespread use of flame weapons raises serious questions about the nature of warfare we are conducting. I have witnessed enemy soldiers emerge from caves with their clothing fused to their flesh, their eyes boiled in their sockets, yet still living. The hospital ships report burn victims who beg for death rather than endure the agony. Are we liberators, or are we becoming something else? The debate reached the highest levels. Secretary of War Henry Stimson questioned whether such weapons violated the laws of war, only to be told that no international convention specifically banned flamethrowers. The operators themselves struggled with their role. Corporal Eugene Sledge, who witnessed flamethrower operations on Peleliu and Okinawa, wrote, "We had created monsters who breathed fire, and we were those monsters. The Japanese were fanatics, yes, but watching a man burn to death, hearing him scream as his flesh melted, it changes you. We told ourselves it saved American lives, and it did. But at what cost to our souls?" Some operators dealt with their guilt through dehumanization, referring to burning out caves as pest control or frying termites. Others broke completely. The 1st Marine Division reported that flamethrower operators were 3 times more likely to require psychiatric evacuation than regular infantry. By war's end, military analysts attempted to quantify the flamethrower's impact on the Pacific War. The numbers were staggering. Conservative estimates placed Japanese casualties from flame weapons at 30,000 killed, with perhaps twice that number wounded or incapacitated. Flamethrowers had cleared over 3,000 fortified positions, from simple spider holes to elaborate tunnel complexes. They had saved an estimated 50,000 American casualties by eliminating the need for costly frontal assaults on fortified positions. But the statistics told only part of the story. Each number represented a human being who died one of the most agonizing deaths imaginable. The efficiency was undeniable. On Iwo Jima, positions that would have required company-strength assaults could be cleared by a single flame team in minutes. Operational analysis showed that flamethrowers achieved a kill ratio of 25 to 1 compared to conventional infantry tactics against fortified positions. They reduced the time needed to clear cave complexes by 90%. On Okinawa, flame tanks destroyed an average of 7 positions per day, each potentially containing dozens of defenders. The Marine Corps estimated that without flamethrowers, the capture of Okinawa would have required 6 additional months and 100,000 more casualties. The weapon had proven so effective that plans for Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan, called for over 1,000 flamethrower operators and 200 flame tanks in the first wave alone. The flamethrower's effectiveness in the Pacific War left an indelible mark on military thinking and moral consciousness. Post-war studies revealed that Japanese military doctrine had completely failed to account for flame weapons. Their defensive positions, designed to withstand artillery and aerial bombardment, became death traps when faced with liquid fire. The psychological impact persisted long after the war. Japanese survivors reported lifelong nightmares of burning caves, of comrades turned to living torches. American veterans struggled with what they had done. Reunions of flamethrower operators were marked by heavy drinking and shared silence about their wartime experiences. The weapon's legacy influenced post-war military development. The success in the Pacific led to improved flamethrowers in Korea and Vietnam, each iteration more efficient at delivering death by fire. But it also sparked international efforts to ban such weapons. The 1980 Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons restricted the use of incendiary weapons against civilians, though military targets remained legal. The moral questions raised by the flamethrower's use in World War II continue to resonate. Military historians debate whether the ends, saving American lives and shortening the war, justified the means. What remains undebatable is the weapon's terrible effectiveness and the price paid by those who wielded it and those who faced it. Among the thousands who carried flamethrowers in the Pacific, few saw as much action as Corporal Anthony Casamento of the 1st Battalion, 5th Marines. Over 2 years of combat from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, Casamento burned out over 50 enemy positions and survived when most operators didn't. They called us Dragon Men because that's what we were. We breathed fire and death. Guadalcanal, Peleliu, Okinawa. I carried that cursed tank through them all. The weight wasn't the tanks on your back. It was the weight of what you did. I remember every position I burned, every scream I heard. On Peleliu, I flamed a hospital cave by mistake. The smell of medicine mixed with burning flesh. I can't eat barbecue to this day. They gave me medals, called me a hero. But heroes don't wake up 40 years later, still smelling phosphorus and flesh. Heroes don't see burning men every time they close their eyes. I survived the war, but part of me stayed in those caves, burning forever with the men I killed. That's the price of breathing dragon's fire. You never stop burning inside. The American flamethrower in the Pacific War presents us with one of military history's starkest moral equations. On one side, 30,000 Japanese soldiers burned to death, many in agony beyond description. On the other, tens of thousands of American lives saved by avoiding frontal assaults on fortified positions. The flamethrower was born from tactical necessity. The Japanese refusal to surrender and their masterful defensive positions left American commanders with impossible choices: storm the positions and lose thousands of men, or burn the defenders out. They chose fire, and in doing so, they chose efficiency over humanity. The weapon worked exactly as intended, perhaps too well. It turned the human body's need for oxygen into a vulnerability, transformed defensive positions into crematoriums, made the very ground burn beneath defenders' feet. Yet the story of the flamethrower is also the story of the men who carried them, young Americans who became dealers in humanity's most primal fear and paid a psychological price that lasted lifetimes. They saved their fellow Marines by taking on a burden that would haunt them forever. The burden of hearing their enemies' last screams, of smelling death by fire, of knowing they had inflicted one of the cruelest deaths imaginable. The flamethrower revealed truths about modern warfare that we still grapple with today. When faced with an enemy who refuses to surrender, who uses terrain and fortification to multiply their defensive power, how far will we go to preserve our own forces? What weapons are too terrible to use, even in a just cause? These questions have no easy answers. What we know is this: the flamethrower shortened the Pacific War, saved American lives, and broke Japanese defensive doctrine. It also created scenes of horror that haunted a generation of veterans and raised moral questions that echo through military ethics to this day. In the end, the flamethrower's story is a reminder that in war, victory often comes at a price, measured not just in lives lost, but in humanity surrendered. The 30,000 Japanese soldiers who died by flame were enemies, yes, but they were also human beings who died in agony. The Americans who killed them were heroes to their country, but they carried the weight of what they'd done for the rest of their lives. That is the true legacy of the dragon's breath. Not just the enemy positions cleared or the battles won, but the terrible arithmetic of hell that modern warfare demands we calculate, and the men who paid the price for solving that equation with fire.